Loki Season 2 epic finale. I'm just coming off with a hot take. How Loki created YGGDRASIL, the world tree from Norse mythology, and how that relates to the Bible.
SpiritLife!
Hey, I'm Bruce on SpiritLife. I do Christian commentary. And the season finale had a couple of good points and a couple of bad points. First of all, the good. Loki seems to have learned a lesson he already learned about self-sacrifice, but he learned it again, and I guess that's in line with the Ouroboros, or the snake eating its own tail, in the sense that he's going through the same cycle that he previously went through. Loki, as a character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that we're watching as entertainment, has gone through a cycle of learning, the value of helping others, and then he kind of stabs them in the back again, and then he learns the value of helping others, and then he stabs them in the back a little bit. Eventually, the Loki that we loved from Infinity War was able to make a real sacrifice, and he actually died, not just pretended to die. But this Loki is a variant. He's never been through all of that character development, and he had to learn how to do all of that all over again. And if you look at my Season 1 commentary, you'll notice that I thought the writers wrote him into a position where he learned self-sacrifice when he helped Sylvie. But now he had to do it all over again. And so I do have to say it's a good point when a character of any kind, in any form of entertainment, learns self-sacrifice. Why? Why is that the theme that keeps coming up over and over again? Not just for Loki, not just for the MCU, but for all of human history. All of our best stories have always had that theme, because it is the theme. It's the story of Christ. It's the story of Jesus laying down his life. There can be no greater story than Jesus, because he is the greatest man. He's the God-man, the actual God-man. Not just a God, lowercase g, but the one true God, the transcendent, uncreated being who's the author of all life and who all of existence is contained within his existence. That God, the one true God, came in human form. He was completely innocent, completely not deserving of any kind of punishment, and yet he took our punishment. He self-sacrificed in the most epic way, because he didn't just die a painful death on the cross, although the physical torture was bad, but he experienced the fullness of the punishment of sin, the fullness of the rejection and the shame and the suffering and all of the horrors of all of mankind and all of our sin. And so that is the story that humankind was created to remember and to experience and to partake as we commune with our Creator. That's why Jesus said, "Eat of my flesh and my blood," when he offered the Last Supper as communion. We're supposed to commune with him and take in that message, and us become little Christ. That's what the word Christian means, is a little Christ. We're supposed to emulate his example by laying down our lives. We're supposed to crucify our personal desires. And so, spoiler alert, at the end, Loki would rather do anything he can to be with Sylvie and to be with the rest of his friends, but he lays that down for the greater good of preserving those friends' lives at the risk of his own life being filled with a vast sense of emptiness and loneliness. Now, he could be filled with some sense of purpose, glorious purpose even, but it's a very lonely existence there at the top. And so that was a self-sacrificial moment for him, and I have to praise that. The writers did a good job because, again, anytime we relate that same kind of story, it goes back to Christ. It goes back to the number one epic human story that we could ever imagine, because nothing else compares. And in one sense, every story is kind of compared to the one story of the Lord, because he's the author of humanity. Now, again, that being said, that leads me to my negative, because God is the author of life. He's the one who designed creation itself. He is the one existence, the one transcendent, uncreated, eternal existence, eternally existing from infinity past and all the way infinity into the future. All of existence exists within his existence. That makes him completely different, a totally other than holy being. And that makes him different than any of the other lesser gods with a lowercase g from fiction, or the demons throughout human history that people worshipped as if they were deities. there is no comparison. There's no divine being, there's no supernatural being, there's no angel or demon or whatever that can even come close. There's no comparison, because the thing that makes God who he is and what he is ontologically is that he is absolutely different than all else, because all else is created, and it's created by him. Therefore, Loki is not a god. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I can't stand when the MCU wants to have their cake and eat it too. On the one hand, they said near the very beginning of the MCU, they said that the Asgardians were not actually gods. They were not immortal. They live, they die. They just happen to have a long lifespan. And furthermore, they weren't totally invulnerable. They could be killed. They could be harmed. And so Loki was not even an Asgardian. He was actually an ice giant. And I think the Loki show has forgotten that. He's merely an ice giant, and I don't know what their power set is supposed to be, but he learned somehow to just look different, to look Asgardian. But at the end of the day, he's not even Asgardian. He just happened to learn a few spells and magic from his witch mother. That's a whole nother thing. I'm not going to be the one guy that's like, this is witchcraft, and that's a whole nother topic. My point is, if you're watching the show, you've already given that a pass. But at the end of the day, none of that explains how Loki somehow has the ability to, spoiler alert, walk down the ramp and then start manipulating, and he's grabbing ropes and vines and he's figuring out what to put together, and he's giving some of them life or something. I don't know. I turned to my wife and my daughter. We were watching the finale together, and I'm like, what are we watching right now? Like, what is even happening? The show didn't really do a lot to explain all that. In fact, I didn't think the show did a lot to explain how he even got to the point of time slipping in the first place. It all began when Sylvie kicked him through a door, but she used the bracelet from He Who Remains to send him back to the TVA. I guess that set him off course or something. I don't know. It's like Marvel wants to have their cake and have a really sci-fi oriented adventure, but then they want to eat it too, meaning they want to have magic. And they want to just say, well, it's all just magic and he's a god. But at the end of the day, despite his role where he did sacrificially take on the role of managing the timelines, he's not omnipotent. He's not omniscient. How could he possibly observe everything that he needs to? Especially after they had already established that there's an infinite number of timelines. It's just impossible. And so it really irks me. Not just theologically, because again, we've gone there. I've discussed the theological, biblical side of it, but I'm just irked from the point of view of the show itself. According to the rules of this MCU universe, Loki ought not be able to do what he's doing, and he can't, be He Who Remains, but of his own powers. I don't even know what's happening. Maybe they'll give some more insight. I thought for sure they were going to give at least a teaser for the Kang Dynasty. I suppose that now that he's managing multiple timelines, the TVA's job is to try to snuff out Victor Timely's or He Who Remains' or Kang the Conqueror's. And maybe that's their goal, is to snuff out those guys before they can rise up and create a multiversal war. I don't know. But they didn't really even set up the Kang Dynasty movie. I found that surprising. So I hope that I'm not sounding overtly critical and just too negative right now, because I have some problems with the finale, the unanswered questions, and just the weird ability to not follow their own rules. But I do have to just say that the ultimate grievance is really just a theological one. Loki has been shown to be immortal, and he just doesn't have the ability, the wisdom, he doesn't have the altruism of heart to actually manage the timelines. Not the way that the Lord, God, Yahweh, actually manages the one and only timeline, because there is only one. And we've talked about that in previous episodes. There's only one timeline in real life because our actions have consequences. If there were an infinite regress of so many different timelines based on every tiny, minute little decision you could or could not make, then none of your actual decisions would have consequences. There's just a version of you that did and a version that didn't. A version that sinned, a version that was pure. But in reality, there's only one of us. God gives us one chance, one life to make the most of our lives. We have to live it according to His standards and do the best we can. And then there's a judgment. And we have to answer for every idle word. We have to answer for the way we squandered our time. the way that we've used our time to help others to build God's kingdom, to worship the Lord in spirit and in truth, or to face the punishment of not doing those things. And so all of this rambling is just to say, what's your thoughts? Did you like the show? Did you find some spiritual meaning behind it? If you haven't seen the other commentaries, it may help to see some of the other points of view, because I did get into the idea of free will versus predeterminism. I got into the idea of whether or not Loki is an actual real-world demon that was worshipped by the Norse peoples. I got into the idea of what it means for us to use our one and only timeline to make the most of our life. And so check those out. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the show, how you think it fits in with the MCU, what theological musings you might have. Hit the like and subscribe button. As always, it's Bruce on Spirit Life.
Won't you come, won't you come?